Starting over abroad in your 30s sounds like the adventure of a lifetime, until reality hits in ways no one talks about. For a lot of Americans, moving abroad isn't about vacation anymore. It's about escaping a life that stopped feeling fulfilling. But no one talks about how starting over in another country quietly changes who you become. We explore the emotional realities, biggest mistakes, and life-changing mindset shifts people face when leaving America to start over abroad, backed by insights from Numbeo, Internations, and Expatistan. Watch until the end to discover what Americans in their 30s are truly searching for overseas, and why so many never see life the same way again. You don't realize how exhausted you are until you finally step outside the life that's been draining you for years. For a growing number of Americans in their 30s, moving abroad is no longer just a dream fueled by Instagram photos or travel videos. It often begins with something quieter and heavier: burnout, the kind that builds slowly after years of chasing deadlines, paying bills, and trying to keep up with a version of success that never feels satisfying for long. Many spent their 20s believing hustle culture would eventually reward them. They worked longer hours, answered emails late at night, and sacrificed sleep, relationships, and peace of mind in hopes that stability would finally arrive. But somewhere along the way, life started feeling repetitive. Wake up, commute, work, scroll, sleep, repeat. Days blurred together until even weekends felt like recovery periods instead of actual living. At the same time, the cost of staying afloat kept climbing. Rent increased, groceries became more expensive, healthcare felt stressful instead of reassuring. Even people earning decent salaries began feeling trapped by the pressure of simply maintaining their lifestyle. Some realized they were working harder every year while feeling emotionally emptier inside. And emotional exhaustion changes people in ways they rarely talk about openly. It can make someone feel disconnected from their own ambitions, relationships, and identity. Eventually, many begin asking themselves a dangerous question: is this really what life is supposed to feel like? That question becomes the beginning of change. For many people, moving abroad isn't about adventure anymore. It's about breathing again. It's about waking up somewhere new and hoping life can feel slower, lighter, and more human. Not perfect, not effortless, but different enough to finally feel alive instead of constantly overwhelmed. You wouldn't want to miss the finale. It's going to literally blow your mind. The biggest surprise about starting over abroad is realizing you brought the same version of yourself with you. At first, everything feels magical. The new streets, different language, unfamiliar routines, and the excitement of finally escaping the life that once felt suffocating. Many people in their 30s move abroad believing distance alone will transform them. They imagine a new country automatically creating a new mindset, new habits, and a completely different life. And for a while, it almost feels true. Someone who felt burned out in America suddenly feels energized walking through cafes in Lisbon, night markets in Bangkok, or quiet neighborhoods in Spain. The change of scenery creates temporary emotional relief. Problems seem smaller when life looks different on the outside, but eventually the emotional luggage catches up. The people who moved abroad solely from an escape mindset often discover that stress, anxiety, loneliness, insecurity, or lack of direction didn't disappear at the airport. They simply followed them overseas. Some begin falling into the same unhealthy routines they had back home, endlessly scrolling online, isolating themselves, procrastinating, or feeling dissatisfied no matter where they live. One of the biggest mistakes people make is romanticizing reinvention. Social media makes it look easy. Quit your job, buy a one-way ticket, and suddenly become happier, calmer, and more fulfilled. But real transformation rarely happens that quickly. A different country can inspire change, but it cannot magically heal unresolved emotional patterns overnight. That's why many expats eventually realize something uncomfortable but important. A different country can change your environment, but not your unresolved habits. The people who thrive abroad are usually not the ones running away from themselves. They're the ones willing to confront who they are while building a different kind of life. Because moving abroad doesn't automatically create a new identity. It simply gives you space to decide whether you're finally ready to change. Stick around and find out why you should build a lifestyle around stability and not around freedom. At first, complete freedom feels like the answer to everything you thought was wrong with your old life. After years of rigid schedules, long commutes, and non-stop pressure back in America, many people move abroad determined to live differently. They promise themselves no more exhausting routines, no more corporate burnout, and no more feeling trapped by the clock. For the first time in years, life feels open, flexible, unrestricted, and in the beginning, it feels incredible. Some start waking up whenever they want, working remotely from cafes, traveling between cities, or changing plans on impulse. Every day feels spontaneous compared to the structure they left behind. There's no boss watching them, no fixed routine, and no clear definition of what each week is supposed to look like. It feels liberating, almost like reclaiming control over life itself. But over time, something unexpected begins happening. Without realizing it, many slowly drift into a lifestyle with no real stability underneath it. Sleep schedules become inconsistent. Motivation becomes unpredictable. Days start blending together again, except this time without any structure holding them in place. The excitement of endless flexibility slowly turns into uncertainty, and uncertainty can quietly become exhausting. Some expats eventually discover that too much freedom creates a strange emotional weight. Decisions that once felt exciting begin feeling overwhelming. Where should they live next? Should they settle down or keep moving? What career are they actually building? What kind of future are they creating? The absence of structure starts producing anxiety they never expected. That's why many long-term expats eventually learn an important truth. Too much freedom without structure can quietly create anxiety. The people who succeed abroad often aren't the ones chasing permanent escape or endless flexibility. They're the ones who eventually create routines, responsibilities, and emotional stability within their new life. Because real freedom doesn't come from avoiding structure entirely. It comes from building a life stable enough that freedom actually feels sustainable. Keep watching to discover what confusing cheap living for fulfillment can do to your frame of mind. Saving money in another country can feel life-changing until you realize affordability alone doesn't automatically create fulfillment. For many Americans in their 30s, one of the biggest motivations for moving abroad is financial relief. After years of rising rent, expensive healthcare, debt, and non-stop pressure to keep earning more, discovering countries where life costs far less feels almost unreal. Suddenly, people can afford apartments near the beach, eat out regularly, hire help, or work fewer hours while maintaining a comfortable lifestyle. At first, it feels like they've escaped the system entirely. The slower pace of life also feels refreshing. Mornings feel calmer. Meals last longer. People seem less rushed and less obsessed with productivity. Compared to the constant pressure many experience back home, everyday life abroad can feel softer and easier to breathe in. And honestly, that change matters. Many expats genuinely become happier after leaving environments that drain them emotionally and financially. But over time, another realization often begins to surface quietly beneath the excitement. An easier lifestyle is not always the same thing as a meaningful life. After the novelty fades, some people begin noticing that lower cost and beautiful surroundings don't automatically answer deeper emotional questions. They may still feel uncertain about purpose, relationships, identity, or long-term direction. The distractions become quieter abroad, which sometimes forces people to confront thoughts they were previously too busy to notice. That's why many expats eventually experience a second emotional transition. Saving money abroad feels exciting at first, but eventually people start asking deeper questions. Questions like, what kind of future am I actually building? Where do I truly belong? What makes life meaningful beyond comfort and affordability? The people who stay abroad long-term usually discover that fulfillment comes from more than cheaper living. It comes from creating connection, purpose, community, and emotional stability. Things no country can automatically provide on its own. Make sure to watch all the way through. You won't believe what we found to happen should you lose connection while starting over. The hardest part of starting over abroad is often realizing how much of your old life quietly disappears behind you. In the beginning, moving to another country feels exciting and full of possibility. New places, new routines, and new experiences create the feeling that life is finally moving forward again. But while many people prepare for the financial and logistical challenges of relocating overseas, far fewer prepare for the emotional distance that slowly develops over time. At first, staying connected seems easy. There are video calls, group chats, social media updates, and messages from friends back home asking about the adventure. But eventually, life keeps moving for everyone. Family gatherings happen without you. Close friends get married, change careers, have children, or move away themselves. Conversations become less frequent. Time zone differences make communication harder. Slowly, people who once felt central to your everyday life begin feeling farther away emotionally, and that realization can hit harder than expected. Many expats discover that building a new life abroad can also create periods of deep isolation. Even in beautiful countries surrounded by people, loneliness can quietly appear in ordinary moments. Eating dinner alone, spending holidays away from family, or realizing nobody nearby truly knew the older version of you before the move. That emotional disconnect often creates an identity shift people rarely talk about openly. You can reinvent your life abroad, but you also lose parts of your old identity. The version of yourself connected to hometown friendships, familiar routines, family traditions, and shared history slowly changes over time. And while reinvention can feel empowering, it can also feel strangely disorienting. That's why many long-term expats eventually realize that starting over is not only about building something new, it's also about grieving certain parts of the life you left behind. Because creating a new identity abroad sometimes means accepting that not every piece of your old one will come with you. Don't go anywhere, because you'll want to know why you shouldn't believe that everyone else has got it all figured out. One of the most dangerous parts of moving abroad is believing everyone else is happier, more successful, and more fulfilled than you are. For many Americans starting over overseas in their 30s, social media becomes both inspiration and emotional pressure. Every day, they see other expats posting beach sunsets, luxury apartments, cafe workdays, and captions about escaping the rat race. Online, it looks like everyone abroad has discovered the secret to happiness, and naturally, comparisons begin. Someone living in Portugal wonders why another expat in Thailand seems more financially free. A remote worker in Spain questions why everyone else appears more social, adventurous, or emotionally settled. Even people enjoying their new life abroad often secretly feel like they're falling behind compared to the image others project online. But most of those images are incomplete. What social media rarely shows are the quiet nights of loneliness, the visa stress, the uncertainty about the future, or the emotional confusion many expats quietly carry with them. It doesn't show the moments people question whether they truly belong anywhere anymore. And it certainly doesn't show the identity crisis that can happen after the excitement of relocation fades. Many people abroad are still searching too. They're just hiding it better. That realization becomes an important emotional turning point for many Americans overseas. They slowly begin understanding that fulfillment is not something other people magically discovered first. It's something everyone is trying to figure out in real time, regardless of where they live. This is where many Americans quietly realize they're still searching for meaning, not just cheaper living, not just freedom, not just escape, but meaning. And sometimes moving abroad helps people finally confront that truth honestly for the first time. Because once the comparisons fade away, many realize the real journey was never only about changing countries. It was about understanding themselves more deeply than they ever had before. You'll want to see how this could possibly lead to a person drifting without a purpose. At some point, the dream life abroad can start feeling strangely empty, even when everything looks perfect on the outside. For many Americans who move overseas in their 30s, the beginning feels exciting and deeply freeing. They finally escape the burnout, pressure, and routines that once made life feel exhausting. Days become slower, expenses become manageable. Life feels lighter than it did back home. But after months or even years abroad, some people quietly begin noticing something unsettling. They're comfortable, but directionless. Without realizing it, life slowly turns into endless wandering. One country becomes another. One apartment becomes another temporary stay. Weeks blend together. Through cafe workdays, travel plans, and loosely structured routines, there's freedom everywhere, but no clear long-term vision underneath it. And eventually, the excitement that once fueled everything starts fading. Because freedom alone is difficult to build an identity around forever. Many expats reach a moment where they stop asking where they want to travel next and start asking deeper questions instead. What kind of future am I creating? Where do I actually belong? What relationships, career, or purpose am I building long term? At some point, the excitement fades, and you still need a reason to wake up every day. That realization can feel uncomfortable, but it also becomes transformative. For many people, it's the first time they truly confront what they were emotionally searching for all along. That's when I realized starting over abroad wasn't really about escaping America. It was about trying to rebuild myself. And honestly, I think this is what most people in their 30s are actually searching for. Not perfection, not permanent vacation, not endless escape. They're searching for a life that feels meaningful, emotionally sustainable, and genuinely aligned with who they are becoming. And sometimes living abroad simply creates enough distance and silence for people to finally hear themselves clearly for the first time in years. So, is this what people who start their lives abroad really search for? Your guess is as good as mine. What most Americans in their 30s are really searching for abroad isn't just a cheaper place to live, it's a different way to exist. After the burnout, the routines, the financial pressure, and the emotional exhaustion back home, moving overseas can feel like a reset button. But over time, what people begin to realize is that the deeper motivation was never only about geography. It was about trying to build a life that feels more intentional, meaningful, and emotionally sustainable. Time freedom becomes one of the biggest desires. Having control over your day instead of being controlled by it, simplicity starts to matter more than status. Fewer bills, fewer obligations, fewer unnecessary pressures. A slower lifestyle feels less like laziness and more like recovery. Purpose becomes essential, even if it starts unclear. And emotional clarity becomes something people didn't realize they were missing until they finally had space to think again. But here's where many people get stuck. The biggest mistake people make abroad is chasing escape instead of intentionally building a life they actually want. Escape can get you on a plane. It can change your scenery. It can even give you temporary relief, but it cannot replace direction. That's why the people who eventually thrive abroad tend to approach it differently. If I had to simplify it, it would come down to these three things I'd prioritize starting over abroad. First, build purpose before lifestyle. Direction matters more than scenery. Second, create structure immediately, because freedom without routine eventually becomes chaos. Third, focus on meaningful connection, because community matters more than novelty. The people who thrive abroad aren't just escaping their old life. They're intentionally creating a new one. Starting over abroad can absolutely change your life, but the real transformation isn't external, it's internal. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about where you go, it's about who you become when everything familiar is gone, and you finally have the space to rebuild your life with intention. Watch our other videos for more real stories and unfiltered experiences of long-term expats building a life and calling a new country home.